What is up, guys? 70 Savage here. Today we have a very exciting day. We just picked up this brand new four-wheel drive Sprinter van. We're gonna be converting it into a full-on tiny home, and today is the very first project. We are gonna be installing the sound deadening mat. What it does is very simple. It's actually included right in the name. It just makes sounds in the van while you're driving quieter. To demonstrate, I'm gonna show you guys what it sounds like. So this right here is pretty much 100% of what you're going to need to install this Butyl Mat. It is a very easy project. I highly recommend doing this as your first project on the van. First, we've got some isopropyl alcohol and some rags to apply that isopropyl alcohol. That's just gonna be used to clean the surfaces before we stick the Butyl Mat on. We've got some cutting and marking tools, and then we've got this roller, which you actually use to do the sticking of the mat on the inside of the van. Finally, we have the Butyl Mat itself. It comes in these boxes right here. They're pretty heavy. I will put a link to this product that I use in the description below. And when you unpack them, they look a little bit like this. They're pretty heavy mats with some reflective material on top. I'm not really sure what that does. Maybe it helps with thermal insulation a little bit. But what really matters is the thickness of these things. It is a thick layer of butyl material that when rolled sticks to most things. So the goal of this job is to apply that material we just looked at to every single one of these wall cavities all throughout the van. You can see that in some of the cavities, for instance, in my van, all of these top cavities here already have a layer of Butyl Mat installed. This is installed at the factory. They do a little bit of sound deadening for you. The manufacturer recommends that you only cover about 25% of the sheet metal of the van to have maximum effect. If you look at the factory sound deadening in this 2020 van, it does cover roughly 50% of each wall panel. So that's what we're gonna aim for. All right, guys, so this is basically just a long repetitive process of measuring out the cavities that you want to apply the mat to, cutting the mat, and then installing the mat on the surface. You're only gonna wanna attach this Butyl Mat directly to the sheet metal that's both the interior and exterior surface of the van. So these big flat ones here. Let's start with this panel right here. Let's go ahead and measure out how much sheet metal is on the van. We've got about 10 inches of width and about 22 inches of length. So we've got the sheet that we just cut out. It's pretty close to the dimensions of this. We obviously have to trim some of the curves, and to do that, we're gonna use scissors. And now we have ourselves a perfectly cut out panel. All we have to do is actually adhere it to the van. All we need for this step is our isopropyl alcohol, a rag to apply it to the wall, the sheet we cut out, and that roller that I was talking about. By the way, link to this roller in the description below as well. It dries really fast. In this case, mine dried in about 10 seconds. So now we are ready to apply the sheet of Butyl Mat that we cut out. This stuff is super easy to work with. It's literally peel and stick. You just take the backing off of the Butyl Mat, which exposes the butyl, the black side, and simply stick her on. You want to start by only sticking one section of it on, and then you want to roll your way down to provide maximum adherence for the whole piece that you cut out. Now that we have the top anchored, you just want to work your way down. In terms of the pressure that you want to use, you want to be firm, but not firm enough to where you're going to be denting this sheet metal. Remember that this is the same piece of sheet metal that you can see from the outside of the van. If you're really just cranking on getting this Butyl Mat attached to your wall and you dent the panel, you're going to see it on the outside. You actually want to make sure it's not too close to the edges because you have to be able to get your roller into those edges. Now that we have the very first sheet done right here, it's going to be pretty similar process for the rest of these ones along the window level. Let's go ahead and get cracking. All right, guys, so we are 5 minutes into this build and we already made our first mistake. Sometimes it's going to take breaks. This was an unintentional break, but we're going to put a window here. It's going to be tough to use a jigsaw if there's Butyl Mat in the way. This stuff is just going to gunk up the blade. And there's really no reason to try and predict exactly where the window is going to go because I'm getting these kind of like special windows. They're Arctic turn windows. I don't know exactly where I'm going to place them yet. I can't peel this one off right now because it's so hot outside that it's just gunking my hands up. I'm going to leave it there for today, but I'm going to stop putting Butyl Mat on the windows, and I recommend you do the same. Pro tip, always put the lid back on your isopropyl alcohol, especially if you're keeping it on the floor. You're gonna kick this thing over. I just did it, and it took me about 30 seconds before it happened. Save yourself a lot of time and frustration. Get some twisty caps and twist those bad boys. Here's what a sheet that's half done looks like close up. You can see that the top triangles are a little bit more crushed than the uncrushed ones, but they're not completely flattened. That's about how much pressure you want to apply. Yo, check it out, guys. We grain matched it. So we just finished the very first day on this project. This is also the very first day working on this van. I am exhausted. I've never been so stoked to be exhausted like this in my life. I feel the van build in my veins again, and it is amazing. This is how much we got done. So we got the middle panels where we're not gonna have windows. We got below where we're gonna put windows on the back panels. We got the back doors. It is finally the weekend, and it is also finally free of smoke in the air here. We've had some pretty terrible fires over the past few weeks. Since we had a couple of days to think about this, I've actually made a slightly different decision than just doing everything in the van. We are no longer going to cover 100% of these panels with additional sound deadening material. These ones have barely more coverage than the factory material. Because there's metal all around, you can see it goes in there, you can really only get your roller so far through, and you really can't cover that much more space than the factory sound deadening material. So what we're gonna do is not every single panel, we're just gonna do the ones that have a low amount of factory sound deadener. So like this panel right here, there's obviously quite a bit more room that I can do, so I'm gonna do that panel. The main reason we backtracked on covering 100% of the panels with additional sound deadening material is this stuff is actually pretty heavy. Although I've done a back of the napkin calculation on how much this conversion is going to weigh, and I still have about 1,000 pounds of free weight that I can use for cargo and stuff, I still don't want to add any weight where I really don't need to add weight. Just to provide some context with how hard this stuff is to get off, this is the panel that I messed up on where I'm going to put a window. Trying to remove this is probably going to take me about 20 minutes of just slowly peeling it back. There's no way this stuff is ever coming off on its own. Okay guys, so the hardest part about this whole installation is definitely the wheel wells. The way that I did it is I started out with one 16 by 16 inch square, and then I just laid that one on flat. Well, that one's pretty easy. And then on the sides here, I cut 4 4-inch strips, and I basically laid half the strip down, cut it where it was really struggling to bend, stuck that. I took the second half of that strip, laid it down before unsticking the backing, drew really roughly with the marker where I needed to cut it and the kind of angle that I needed to cut it at. And then I put it on, unstuck the backing, and it worked well. I did the same thing with this strip, kind of did the same thing with this strip. There's a couple more angles, and then I filled in the final gap with this triangle right here. It's really just like puzzle pieces though. If you start with those 4-inch strips and then just cut each piece accordingly, you can get pretty good fit. It took us almost 2 full days of work, but we are finally complete with the sound deadening mat installation. It came out looking pretty good. That includes all of the window level sound deadening that we needed, as well as some additional sound deadening near the wheel wells on the bottom portion of the van, the back doors, and the most time consuming, arguably the most important part, the wheel wells. So one thing that I was thinking about a lot and we did not end up doing was the ceiling. The ceiling already has some sound deadening material across most of the middle ribs. Not a lot of road noise comes through the ceiling. Obviously, most of it's going to be coming through the floor of the van. I got really lucky with this van, and most of the panels already had pretty good coverage with the factory sound deadening. Let's go ahead and see the results. It did feel a little bit quieter. I'd say just a nudge. If I had to put a number on it, I'd say it sounded about 15 to 20% quieter with the sound deadening insulation in. Keep in mind, guys, we only had to cover about 10 different panels and the wheel wells because most of the van already had the sound deadening material installed. If your van does not have the sound deadening material installed, you'll probably see a much more drastic difference. Overall, we ended up using just over 1 box of Noico, maybe about 1.5. There's a link to this product in the description below, as well as some of the specialty tools like that roller. If you have a 144, you could probably get away with just 1 box, but if you order them on Amazon, you might as well order 2, and it's gonna take you way less than 30 days, which is their return window. Then you can return the unused box. Don't be shady using half the box and returning it. So a couple of important points about this installation. The total cost of this project in terms of materials was about 150 bucks. We weighed the van before this project. It weighed in at 5,920 pounds. Since the weight of this project is really easy to calculate, I'm not gonna drive back to the scale and reweigh it. We added about 35 pounds. So that brings us to 5,920 900 and quick mass 55 pounds. So we have quite a bit of room to spare. Our first project on the van is officially complete. The van build is officially underway. If you are not yet a member of the Savage fam, slap that subscribe button below. If you did like this video, then slap that like button below. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.